how do you provision devices? You need to get all that stuff sorted out really, because otherwise it's hard to get, once you start the project, so, oh, by the way, we need to do this. And it's hard to get those people then to engage with you.
I'm going to go live now, guys. So just give me a second while I hit the button. And I'll confirm when it's done. Here we go.
So, oh, by the way.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay on your side?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in London, the Tales of a Network Engineer. My name is Harry Nija, and I'm joined by my co-host Jan and a couple of special guests. Today, we're going to be talking around network access control, NAC. I have no clue about this subject, so I'm going to educate myself and listen to my colleagues on the call and ask some questions throughout. But before we kick off, Jan, do you want to introduce yourself first?
My name's Jan Kodabash. I work for Universal Technology Solutions, and I'm based out of London.
Amazing. Dino?
Hi, I'm Dino Purnomo. Used to work for Jan many times, unfortunately. So currently I'm contracting for one of the financial institution in London.
Amazing. Yaseen?
I'm a network engineer working with Universal alongside Jan.
Yeah.
So basically, we have the world's top network engineers in this call, haven't we? Top three.
I wouldn't call yourself that yet, Harry. You wouldn't call yourself that yet, Harry.
You guys, I don't know about you. I'm not. I'm just the one that asks questions.
Yeah. No worries.
He's like a sponge. He just absorbs.
I thought before we kick off anyway, we normally cover a little bit of things during the week that we've seen. Does anyone want to kick off with anything they've seen this week? Or I guess World Cup has been on the headlines.
Well done to England. But today's going to be the reckoning. I think it's going to see us get one over on our US counterparts. So that'll be interesting. Yeah, definitely.
You've got quite a lot of US friends, haven't you?
Yeah. Some hopefully will see this. I'll be messaged in the background.
If we lose to the USA, it will be actually quite bad for reputation, I think. Although they are a better squad, they've got more Champions League players and stuff, and so they are a better team. But yeah, this is a big game. Definitely a big game. But
interesting.
Iran won, Jan, so you must be happy about that. Considering
definitely. That, and in fact, I think what's going to be an interesting one was Iran, USA when they play.
Yeah.
That will rigged with controversy and.
For anyone that's joined this live, Jan is Iranian. He's got some Iranian. He was jumping up and down when they beat Wales.
Everyone's dropping off now. Everyone's dropping off.
Dino, how about you? Anything you've seen this week? Anything you worked on? Anything to highlight?
No, unfortunately not. Yeah, I've not. To be honest, I've not. Yeah.
I know why. Because just before we joined the school, we were talking about kids, and you've got two. So now I know why.
Partly that, and then unfortunately lots of changes for work that I've been doing. So yeah.
How about you, Yaseen? Anything?
Not much. I've just been watching a lot of football, obviously, I'm sure like everybody else. Yesterday's the Brazil game, I'm not sure how many people saw that game, but that second goal was something, wasn't it? I mean, that was the special goal. So
that guy, not even a striker, he plays on the wing. But he plays on the wing for Tottenham, but he's up front for Wales. Quite interesting.
There was probably a lot of injuries yesterday after a Power League where people had attempted that.
Oh my God!
Overweight dads going to Power League after that game,
doing their backs in, trying to turn.
I think England, if they win their group, they will play France, Brazil, Belgium, and another team. That's their route. So England, Brazil. I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, if they can keep winning.
Good. All right. I mean, we need to play games like that. So actually, kind of shows us how good we really are. So it'll be good.
One thing that I saw this week, which was interesting, was the Japanese team. They obviously had that shock win against Germany, like literally losing 1-0, and in the last 20 minutes they scored 2 goals and smashed around the park. But what happened is, I don't know if you've seen, but the fans in the stadium have been cleaning the stadium after the games. And also the team in the dressing room has been cleaning the dressing room spotlessly. And there's a post online that's gone viral about it. But yeah, I think Japan, that kind of culture, that kind of respect, gratitude, attention to detail, their values. I'm like, it's so cool when all these nations come together and you see what that's like in a place, isn't it? And now it's just a case of teaching my kids how to do that.
Good luck with that then.
Anyway, let's move on to, so this week we're going to be talking about network access control. So Dino, I was thinking maybe if you can kick us off with maybe a high level overview.
Yeah. So I guess, from a kind of like high level, I mean, NAC, people say network access control or admission control. To me, it's just more the term, the kind of like industry term for products or solution that companies can use to manage access to the network, meaning whether it's wired or wireless or VPN of your laptops or anything else. That's, in a very simplistic term, that is it.
Yep. Got you.
Yep.
So basically, when you're trying to plug devices into the network and that
kind of thing, then basically the network would say, do we know you? Or not the network, something behind the scenes say, do I know you? Do I trust you? If I trust you, then I will let you connect. So that's basically it. Yeah. I mean, in the past, people typically talk about .1x as being NAC, but .1x is or 802.1x is actually the protocol or the technology behind one of the technology that can be used for NAC. So traditionally, people always refer to .1x when talking about NAC, and I think sometimes that can be the challenging part when talking about NAC. Most people actually think .1x rather than NAC itself as a kind of like solution.
And that's interesting there, Dino, is that it has been around for quite a while.
It has, yeah, you're right.
And
yeah.
However, maybe there was some, unsuccessful implementations or unsuccessful take up. NAC kind of puts together a framework around it, which has seen it recently, I think, develop and become a bit more mature. And so that's where it's been successful, where they've wrapped a service, or not a service, but a framework around that solution. Whereas before they were driving it just with the technology piece itself. So yeah.
Agreed.
But yeah, that's what it used to be. But on going, just staying on that, where do we think, because we're talking about control and access control.
Yeah.
Where I've seen it a lot is across the network infrastructure, and mostly networks teams managing or taking up the solution and delivering it.
Yeah.
Do you see it more as an InfoSec type solution? Yeah. Or is it more, should it sit with across the network? That's, if you were to say where it would sit, where do you guys see it?
Okay, from my side, I've experienced both. First, it was with the networks, and then when I was in networks doing that, I thought, you know what, this should sit with InfoSec. Now I'm at the other side, InfoSec, thinking like, this doesn't work either. So I think, and this is now, there are two things here. I think basically there's the policy element of NAC itself in terms of setting up to say what is allowed, how do you know it's allowed, and all these type of things. And I think that should sit with InfoSec, because they should define the security to say we only allow these devices, they must be set up this way.
Yeah.
But you also need networks to give you the coverage, because NAC without network can't really do anything. So you need the network, people to essentially make sure the NAC solution has access to the infrastructure and your coverage as well. And the other thing is coverage. And one of the things about all the security solution is that, how do you know that you've got the right coverage? You know what I mean? Because if you implement something that's just great, but you only cover 1% of your estate, well, it doesn't really matter, does it?
Actually, that's a good point. We'll come back to Yaseen. Just so, again, just to keep people, interested in this, and to kind of give us like a scenario where someone can maybe further understand how NAC actually operates, not in the technical part, but for example, where someone would come in and plug something in. What's kind of like a high level end to end?
So I'll kind of start off with how it used to be with organizations who didn't have a NAC solution. So it was very easy for people, end users, to come into the network and plug personal devices in. So if they wanted internet access, they could come in with their personal laptops unrestrictedly, they can get onto the network and have access to the network. Now, obviously, organizations will deem that as a huge threat for many reasons. One, they can spread viruses. One, they can access information they're not supposed to and get access to parts of the network. So slowly, I guess from a business perspective, that was kind of seen, and from a lot of different areas, seen as a risk to the business. So NAC as a solution allows you to provide endpoint security. So now, as Dino mentioned earlier, when you onboard a device, who's onboarding the device? Who is that person that's trying to log onto the network? What device are they logging on with? So from a high level, they're being challenged now. So they're being asked questions. Are you allowed to join the network? Do you have the right credentials? Do you have the right type of device? So it's definitely a layer of security on the edge of your network.
So it's not just the user being challenged, it's now the device they're using to access the networks now also being challenged as well, isn't
Exactly.
it? Yeah,
Exactly. And from many different angles, right? So you can look at it from a corporate device, you can look at it from a BYOD or a contractor who's come in and only needs temporary access, so they could get special privileges, or you could do it across the Wi-Fi BYOD. And now these days, sorry, I know we're probably going to touch on this later on, but there are so many use cases with the modern NAC solution. So I see the modern NAC solution not as, just, adding a corporate device to the network. It's more than that now, because it's become more of a security and an orchestration device through the automation that it provides.
right. Yeah. So, I mean, what if we now, Dino, you mentioned about the profile. So now we've got the end devices that are being challenged, whether it's user or device. You've got that control. Yeah. For me, I also see that visibility. So even just if we stop there and just talk about what that's given, say, the network team and even security, whereas previously we connected device. I'm talking about previously, maybe 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
The network team were always the go-to people, but the visibility we had used different tools. Now, talk about a little bit about the visibility, just without the controls, but what visibility is it giving us?
Well, I mean, to me, one thing, and again, I think this is one thing that people need to try to sell it to other teams, is that even when you just have the visibility, you can share that information to everyone. So when someone say, what do I have in this office? You can actually bring up your, dashboard or whatever console and actually say, well, actually, this is what you have. And you can even, depending how you do it, you can say, well, I've got 200 phones, and I've got, 200 PCs, and some are this, some of that, and I think that's really useful, because then when people say, I have an issue with my laptop, or, and you can even say, this is the IP address. You can actually type it in, and it will tell you what switch is connected to, and everything else, rather than trying to go to kind of like CLI and try to find out where the user is, So from that visibility, even from a help desk perspective, I think that's very useful,
Definitely. That for me, and also there are other hooks you've got into that framework of NAC that can tie in, that furnish that information now. So now, rather than before, we used to work very low level with MAC addresses, and you can kind of work out MAC addresses, what the device is. You're now saying this user has connected, he's using this device, he's even connecting to this. It all ties in, and it gives you a good end-to-end view now from just applying NAC.
Yeah, and even I guess,
and we've not talked about challenging yet or control.
Yeah, and even from a kind of like asset perspective, if you suddenly paying whatever, I don't know, millions for devices, and turn out that you only have 50% of those devices, so kind of like, well, where am I paying £1 million for half of the device that I use? So those kind of things as well. From your asset inventory perspective, it can be useful as well, just from visibility aspect.
Right. So I suppose that's where, now when we talk about visibility, where InfoSec see this as quite critical for them, because now it's given them additional visibility. Where they're using, whereas previously they didn't have that much insight into the network. Let's go on to some of those controls now, because
Yeah.
And now that we've got that visibility, what type of controls, and because it's quite I suppose new to some organizations to be able to actually control what you're letting on, whereas previously, you know, they didn't have that challenge. Are they finding that difficult, or what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, in my case, I think control. The thing about control to me, and this is where I think NAC is it can be a bit challenging without the buy-in from all the other teams, is that in order to actually apply or have a really good control, is that you need to actually able to confirm the device is, what it says it is. You know what I mean? It's just like, you Jan, how do I know that you Jan? But now we're talking about a machine. How do we know that it is the right machine? Because the challenge is that, again, with .1x, you can use certificate. So we know that device is, what it says it is. But the problem is that it's not always supported in other devices. So you end up using the MAC address as the kind of like the authentication method. And when you start doing that, then you might as well not have a NAC, because it's very easy for you to bypass that. And to me, that's the thing that's still very difficult. And in one way, I guess you can deploy it. You can say that we want to have the capability to control access. So say if you GSOC, your SOC, say we have a device which we believe is rogue, you can contain that. So you can approach it from a different angle to say, we want to have the ability to control rogue devices from a network level. Where some, say if other teams can't contain that, you can then contain it by a click of a button, so to speak. And then you can build from there.
Yeah. One thing I just want to add, just add to Dino's point. I guess with MAC addresses, right? You're absolutely right. If you're going to start doing controls based on MAC, just based on MAC addresses, you rather not have a solution. But I guess one thing that complements MAB is profiling, which I think is really helpful, because now you can kind of profile that particular device. And for many, when I say profile, you're looking at attributes related to the device that's joining your network. So you can look at specific type of kind of MAC address that belongs to a vendor, or you can look at certain DHCP values, or you can look at attributes that looks deeper than just a MAC address. And I think that, along with MAB, gives that kind of more rounded solution. It's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's totally secure,
exactly.
But it stops people from spoofing MAC addresses, because I think one of the problems that people had before profiling was, like you mentioned, when you just allow MAC addresses, what was happening was people quite easily find the MAC address of a device and then spoof that MAC address and get onto your network. So
so
I think profiling.
So it's a little bit, and going back to your point, Dino, is you want to be able to set the same criteria, to validate your method of complying or authenticating something in. Because it's almost, I'm trying to give an analogy of I don't know, you go when you go to a nightclub and someone says, you can't enter with trainers, but then it's letting someone else with, you want to make sure that the same criteria is set to everything, because that then validates authentication method, and that
again, it could be it could be as simple as that, to say any devices that we buy must support SNMP-v3, for example. It can be as simple as that, and that's not the .1x way, but I'm just saying that it could be as simple as that, but you need to make sure that from a procurement perspective, the teams are aware that there is a standard in terms of, like, I guess, cyber hygiene, to say, you must meet this, because I guess security is everyone's responsibility, and that's a key thing, isn't it?
So building up on that framework, you've got NAC, but now you build into that framework compliance and process that ensures it's robust. It's not just about the technology again, it's about that process and I suppose governance around the whole piece as well. And we've seen this with a lot of technologies, a lot of solutions. You need all of them to be in line to to get the very best out of it. So totally understand that that part. I'd like to just maybe go on to some of the components of NAC. We've talked about network, edge. You guys have worked with a few different components for example, Forescout, ICE. Can we just get a little bit just on those? You know, are they much different? Are there any others, or you know, what's your
I guess there are many vendors, and Yaseen, you can probably add to this. I mean, there's many vendors, and I guess you can go to gardeners and look at, you know, who are the leaders kind of thing. You know, from my perspective, I've been mainly more involved in the Forescout side. They can do .1x, you know, which .1x is more what I guess we call pre-connect. But I think majority of the companies that I've seen tend to go with post-connect. Post-connect means that it's basically you are innocent until proven guilty. So you always have access, and then they will check whether you're allowed to keep the access or not. And that's it's a bit safer, and I guess it's more kind of like the whole fail open kind of like approach, you know, because the challenge with .1x is basically closed until you are, you know, authorized, so to speak, you know, and that can be quite challenging in some environments. You know, for example, if you find, you know, your investment banks and your traders can't log in Monday morning, you know, you're losing a lot of money. You know, so whereas the post connect model, again, is not great from a security perspective, because people will have that access until they get validated. But it's all about the balance, I guess, you know. But you can also do a pre-connect without .1x. So essentially, you almost like go into like a reception area where you have limited access. You then validate it to then given your proper access, so to speak.
So but those are kind of like approaches, aren't they, Dean? And they can
approaches,
even
exactly. They are approaches more than anything
still,
else.
like I say, is a technology that you can use as a key component to that framework, which is where you add your profiles, where you add the methods of.
I think, I mean, to me, from what I've seen, again, I've not done a lot in terms of the likes of ICE or now Aruba is HP, but I was, you know, I did have visibility of those products in the past many years ago. From a policy perspective, it is quite similar. You know, it's almost like at the end of the day, it's almost like if this then this. You know what I mean? It's essentially, you know, like that really. You know, and I mean, and again, Yaseen probably can add more, because I think you have a lot more experience from a ICE perspective or Cisco ICE perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Sorry, Jan.
No, go on. I just want to say, you know, tell us a little bit about ICE.
So predominantly, you know, I've worked with ICE because the environments I've worked in have been mainly Cisco. So for that compatibility and to have that kind of one support branch, kind of is I think the choice for me. Or companies choosing ICE in those sort of instances. But ICE, like you mentioned, is very similar to like either Aruba or Forescout or other solutions that provide you with that kind of initial guard onto your network. But I think, you know, with ICE, I've seen it mature like hugely from the earlier versions, and it's much more comprehensive now. It's got much, you know, better visibility features. You can do a lot more with it now. And what I like about it, you know, more recently is the whole automation. So, you know, with resources being tightened everywhere, you know, people can now introduce new devices on the network, but with the capabilities of all features like profiling, allows that onboarding to happen more dynamically. You don't have to be involved, especially with dynamic VLANs as well. So. Yeah,
I think to add to that point, to me, I agree with Yaseen in terms of, I think if you can keep it the same vendor. You know, I've been in implementation where the sort of like the sort of like switches and the NAC solution are different, and that can be challenging. You know, if the NAC vendor is a bit more agnostic, like Forescout, it should be okay. But when you say you got Cisco and then with Aruba, yeah, it should work. But you know what I mean? It's just when things break, you don't really want to spend a lot more time dealing with vendors pointing fingers at each other. You know what I mean? That's the thing. I think that's a key thing.
I think you're right in that part, and definitely you've seen, you know, we've seen Cisco mature a lot in that part, and it's almost, you know, a bit more of a pleasure to work with it now. But like you say, Dino, also now then what that allows us to do is when you're working with that single vendor, there's a lot more integration. You don't necessarily have to take them all on. You still have to actually,
exactly.
you know, kind of hedge your bets with it. But at least you've got that option with it, and it's a way you actually integrate it. I think it's not a case of just do it. You still have to, you know, build that around your framework and processes. So no, that's a interesting one. Before you know we carry on the next point, are there any specific implementations? I mean, let me just ask you, and again, we don't have to name anything. What are some of the largest implementations you've seen, just to see how mature and how big?
Okay, I mean, I can't tell you the company.
Oh no, definitely not.
But
No,
there is an implementation of NAC with over 1 million endpoints.
Wow. Okay.
So it's quite a big and challenging environment. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah. So you imagine that just shows you how, you know, mature it has become, and you know the people's willingness to adopt a solution that maybe previously, you know, more reluctant to actually implement. So
but yeah, however, I mean, adding to that, to me, it's just one of those things. Sometimes with this type of stuff is that, you know, because it's a requirement, say a regulatory requirement, people implement it. It may not be implemented as, you know, as best as, you know, you would like it to be. You know, I mean, there is an element, unfortunately, tick the box kind of thing. We've got this. Like, have you got firewall? Yes, we've got firewall. But what's it doing? You know, there's an element of that, unfortunately. But you know, but still, it is a big implementation.
Yeah. So, I mean, on that point, yeah, definitely from a regulation perspective, regulatory requirement, you know, they want to see these things in place. And you say it's tick box. From you know, practical usage from a networks team, I think now that it's almost essential.
I think it's helped
of the networks team.
Yeah.
Being in operations previously, can you imagine you know, someone telling you there's a problem, and now you don't just go with, you know, IP address. You could just, they could tell you the user calling you. You could take that information,
yes,
and you know, break it down because you've actually got that info. So from a network engineer, I think, you know, it's essential.
Yeah, and doing like, say, a refresh of switches, or move office. You know what I mean? You can then have a picture of that. Well, how many devices we had in the previous office? So you can do a kind of like a check to say, well, we had about, you know, 100, and we have about 100 again. So it's kind of a, you know, that you haven't missed anything, you know, from that perspective.
Actually,
so that is very useful.
Interesting you say that. You know, you're probably right in that information is all in there, but one of the things is probably some of the operations teams are so used to still looking at legacy methods of doing it.
Yep, they get the MAC address table, and then
you know what,
you know what I mean?
it's all there, and you're totally right that maybe, you know, I'm seeing it now more and more, and it may kind of I guess decouple the use, or negate the use of some of our old legacy tools, because it is all in there. It's getting them now just to go to that one single point now, and they've got a lot of that information.
So I guess with NAC is just making sure that you can give various team access to it, you know, so they're aware of it, you know. And I think that's probably one of the key things, is that if they can see that it will make their job easier, they will then support you as well, you know. And again, this is just getting the buy-in and being able to sell it to other teams to say, look, actually, this will make things a bit easier for you.
So I've definitely seen it from like an InfoSec, you know, we've provided them a new, you know, visibility into you know, certain areas they're in. Have you seen any other teams that you've given, you know, kind of, you know, controlled access to, that are using this, maybe like facilities, for example?
I haven't, you know, but I mean, in one of the kind of like engagement, it was more kind of like the help desk having access to that, which they find helpful. But yeah, but you know, like you said, the facility teams as well. Absolutely. I mean, basically any teams really, you know, who's got devices on the network, you know, I think they will find it useful.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I wanted to interject, guys, obviously we've got a couple of minutes left, is then we come on to the topic of cost. Like, how much does it cost for something like this? Because obviously, you know, all looks good in terms of what you said, and it gives things that haven't been possible before in terms of visibility and security. But is cost a barrier to it, would you say?
I mean, I guess it depends what you're trying to do. I mean, you know, in terms of getting visibility, I think it should be a lot more affordable than people think. However, when you start getting into control, and then that I think can get a bit expensive and may get a bit more complicated from a support perspective and having the right people, because I think some of the, I guess, expertise for certain NAC products are not, it's not as widely available as that Cisco network engineers, for example. But Yaseen, please, interject here.
No, agreed. Yeah. I think I totally agree with you, because I mean, it depends on the environments as well and how big those are.
Yeah.
But it depends again also on, like you said, what type of features you're using on the solution. Some of the basic solutions for just onboarding devices and doing .1x or PEEP for the initial authentication, like that type of solution is like what they consider basic licensing. So that isn't very expensive, and especially you can virtualize these devices. So
Exactly,
if you already have an infrastructure, a hypervisor, you can virtualize these devices. You don't have to get the physical box. So it's not like Dino again mentioned. It's not as expensive as people actually think. But then you've got to weigh up cost versus security as well, because there's that element. How expensive it's going to be to the business if and obviously for branding and all these other things, if there was a breach.
So definitely, it's definitely a solution, and this is one of them, like you say, because it's it's not specifically you don't have to buy a lot of units. It's more capability enablement. It can be done as a pay as you grow. So as you kind of want to start getting more and more challenging or use more capabilities, you can license it that way. So that kind of controls your cost. But then talking about, you look at this new introduction of this new service, like I said, it probably can, you could probably decommission some of your old tooling that you probably don't need, because a lot of the visibility it gives you, it's already built in. So that's a saving. And in terms of resourcing, if you look at resourcing, the time it takes to kind of correlate all of that information when you're troubleshooting, previously you've probably cut that down, by half. I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, so it's probably difficult to quantify exactly when you're looking at resource, but definitely from that perspective, that is a saving. Yeah, if from that part. So there's
can I just add one more point to that? And when you mention resources, it's not just like you could talk about obviously teams when it comes to provisioning new devices on the network. With the automation aspect of it, people can concentrate on other things. They don't have to go onto the switch, configure the port, because that all happens dynamically. So you're reducing the amount of time you're spending onboarding new devices, because your controls, your policies have already been defined. Now you're just relying on those policies to onboard new devices as well.
Wow. Okay. I mean, we've run over a little bit. I do kind of and Harry, if we can just stay with it for a bit, I want to see what we see happening next with the NAC. Do we see it progressing more? Do we see it being displaced at all? Is there any competing technology with it, or can you see now that it's kind of put a solid hold in our infrastructures? Can you see that being maintained?
I mean, for me, I guess it depends on the environment. If you're going for the kind of like all in cloud kind of thing, and then basically all your devices in the office just going to the cloud, then you kind of like think, well, actually, then the question is like, do you need even wired connection? Is it just going to be wireless? But the interesting thing is another client basically saying, I was like, well, actually, we don't trust wireless, we want wired. So so then it's just that it all depends, what your strategy in terms of your end user devices. Do you want them to be cloud-based? If cloud-based, then you kind of like think, well, I'm just providing internet connection, so do I really need NAC? So it depends really, I think. But
just to that point, then, would you say when it comes to wireless, I guess NAC solutions are
built
very
in,
kind of helpful.
Yeah,
right?
it's already built in, so to speak. Yeah,
because you could do obviously .1x on corporate Wi-Fi. So I guess even with a cloud solution, would you say people with private tenancy, it will help them work wirelessly but access corporate data securely?
Yeah, I mean, again, it all depends to me. Because some companies just wanting to put everything in cloud. So then you kind of like think, well, do I need the corporate wireless? Because I've seen organization where the corporate wireless is actually internet only. They're just using CERT to basically using .1x essentially to go onto the wireless automatically, and that's all. So yeah, I think it more depends on the companies in my well, I guess view or experience, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll close on, I think we all agree that it's a technology that now has matured, and it's likely to stay and just grow. So but definitely I think we've touched on and given some people some insight. It'll be definitely good to do, this is another one I think that's been interesting as well. We had to mention cloud as well. So Harry, maybe this is one we come back with, and
it's definitely a rich,
be a bit...
it's definitely a rich topic. I mean, I posed in terms of the audience, we had Richard watching. So Richard, thanks for watching the show today. He's come in with a question. Does this then not move into ZTNA with people working remotely? That's his question to you guys, if that makes sense.
I don't know what is he? I suppose he's talking about zero touch. Do you think that's what it means? Let me have a look. But yeah.
Does this then not move into ZTNA, zero touch, something? Yeah, it could be, with people working remotely.
Or zero trust.
Network access.
Zero trust.
Zero touch.
Yeah, I don't know what actually. I don't know. What that means. Yeah. Okay, I mean, but I guess some of the NAC vendors are doing more kind of like cloud side of things as well to kind of see what's actually what is actually in the cloud, what is actually being spun up and being used and all that kind of stuff. So there's some vendors out there now looking at that saying like, look, it costs you money to actually have all these VMs running. If they're not actually being used, you basically don't use them, kind of thing. So there is an element of that. So I think a lot of NAC vendors, well, especially like Scout, because they're predominantly been NAC. They're trying to branch out more to do other things, and they talk about microsegmentation, Jan. I think they've got ways of doing that, but whether that's successful or not, I've not tried it myself. But it's certainly quite a reasonable approach as to what they're trying to do in terms of microsegmentation. But again, it's probably another call.
One thing also to finish up on, I look at it from a branding, marketing, user experience perspective. So, user rocks up in his office, plugs his laptop in and can't use it because NAC's in force.
Yeah.
My experience now is a bit, is kind of, so it's getting that balance right, isn't it, between security and experience?
Exactly. Yeah, it is getting that balance, But and then like Yaseen mentioned as well, there's that somewhere that talking about the cost is that, the cost of breach, isn't that? There's an element sometimes we forget to talk about. What if that one machine is the one that's got something, and I think that was at the shipping company that basically got it's some kind of what was the ransomware. I think again it was just from and that's it. It just went everywhere, and they were down for I don't know how many weeks and how many billions. You know what I mean? That's the thing, isn't it? That's the kind of thing. So you don't need it until you need it, like insurance, I guess.
And you know what, Harry, you mentioned that situation, and you know what, you're totally right. That there are situations where that happens, and I saw from a lot of early implementations that experience kind of questioned NAC a lot.
Yes.
But as it's matured, everything's been fine-tuned.
Okay.
Those things before people are now not talking about anymore because they're isolated incidents. People are a lot more used to the fact that, or actually don't even notice it anymore.
I mean, that's the thing, exactly. Especially if you, I'm not saying Post Connect is the only way, but especially with Post Connect, because you are free to roam until until proven guilty. So then that makes it a little bit more easier from a user experience perspective.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay.
All right. Well, look, guys,
that was
thank
good.
you so much. Thanks for your time. Have a great weekend, and everybody who joined for joining as well. And look forward to seeing you next week. I have no clue what the topic is, but we'll figure it out and post it. And let you know.
Thanks, everyone.
And good luck, England, for tonight.
Yeah, definitely agreed. Yeah.
All right.
Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Guys.
Thank you,
Cheers.
everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Dino. Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.